Board Member Wright, did you want to do a brief mic check? Board Member Wright, did you want to do a brief mic check?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Board Member Walsh?
Present. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. We're just doing a brief audio check before we start the meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Well, I'd like to call this October 6th meeting of the Board of Public Utilities to order and ask Secretary Manis to do a roll call.
Thank you, Vice Chair Arnone. Board Member Wright?
Here.
Board Member Watts?
Here.
Board Member Walsh?
Here.
Board Member Grable?
Here.
Board Member Badenford? Vice Chair Arnone?
Here.
And let the record show that Chair Galvin is on a scheduled absence.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the board members to mute their phones and microphones when they are not speaking. And also, now's the time for statements of abstention. Are there any statements of abstentions from any of the board members? Okay, seeing none, move to the next item, which is study sessions, and we have no study sessions. Next, we will consider the minutes. Before accepting the minutes, we're now taking public comment on minutes approval. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. And is there anybody first in the council chamber who wishes to make a statement? If so, let us know. Not seeing anyone. Secretary Manis, do we have anyone online?
There are no public hands or public comments from Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have item 5.1. So, Director Burke, could you please introduce that item?
Thank you, Vice Chair Arnone and members of the board. Our first staff briefing will be our water supply update. And Colin Close, our Senior Water Resources Planner, will be making the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Director Burke, for that introduction. So I will be giving you an update on the storage levels in 3 lakes, Lake Pillsbury, Lake Mendocino, and Lake Sonoma. Some information about how conservation is going region-wide, and update on our conservation campaign, our public information campaign to our public about the drought, and then some information about 2 upcoming community workshops. Next slide, please. Here we're looking at the graph for Lake Pillsbury. It's a little bit difficult to see, but on the very far left edge, you'll see that arrow pointing to the October lake level. For Lake Pillsbury, it's about 81% of the target storage curve, and PG&E has continued to maintain its FERC-mandated flows through the Potter Valley project. So it's a small amount of water being diverted from the Eel to the East Fork of the Russian River, about 5 cubic feet per second. It's very, very low. And that is per their variance request for revised operations that they requested from FERC, and it was approved a few months ago. Despite that very low amount of diversion, the lake volume continues to decline because they are also required to reduce blocks of water back to the Eel River for fisheries purposes. PG&E is continuing to meet twice monthly with the established drought working group that was established back in, I think, 2014 or 15, and then reinstituted during this drought. That group includes state and local water resource agencies, including Sonoma Water, and national and state fish and wildlife agencies, and local Native American tribes and community groups. And they meet twice a month, and they discuss operations of the Lake Pillsbury project and how it is complying with the minimum objectives set by FERC and those set by the fisheries agencies. The 7-day change in storage was 1,123 acre feet. So again, as you can see, that 5 cubic feet per second is not what is causing the decline in the lake. The current storage is 34,826 acre feet. We'll go ahead and take a look at the next slide, please. We're looking at Lake Mendocino, and again, we're looking at the very far left edge of this graph where the arrow shows that Lake Mendocino's storage is currently about 64% of the target water supply curve. So if you look to the bottom of that graph, you'll see the line from last year at this time was much lower. So we are currently at 26,000 acre feet higher than it was this time last year. So that's good news. It's still relatively low compared to the target, but it is in much better condition than it was last year. Sonoma Water has also reported that they're seeing demands for water being pulled out of the Russian River through existing water rights to have diminished. That's very typical with the end of the agricultural irrigation season in September and October. So that, in fact, has allowed them to reduce releases from Lake Mendocino because in-stream flows are staying a bit higher than they would have been during irrigation season. So they've reduced their releases from 85 or 90 cubic feet per second down to 60 cubic feet per second. So that's good news for the lake in terms of being able to hold a little bit more water back in the lake for water supply. The 7-day change in acre feet is a decline of 776 acre feet, and the storage is about 40,654 acre feet right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide, please. This is Lake Sonoma, and as you know, this is a major source of drinking water supply for Santa Rosa and other cities in our area. Again, looking at the far left edge of this graph, you can see the black dot. We're about 44.9% of the water supply capacity. We're just about 1,200 acre feet above where it was last year, so we're tracking very close to what we had last year, and last year was the lowest on record, so we're certainly in need of some good winter storms as soon as possible. The current storage is about 110,000 acre feet, and the 7-day change in storage is about 1,344 acre feet decline per week. And the releases are about 95 cubic feet per second, but we will say that that fluctuates because Sonoma Water's crew is very, very closely monitoring the flows, and as Whenever it is possible, they are adjusting their releases so that they do meet the minimum flow requirements, but they take advantage of any opportunities that they have when natural flows are a little higher to dial back releases a little bit, again, trying to maintain as much water as possible in Lake Sonoma. Next slide, please. As you know, part of the temporary change order was that in order to be allowed to have those lower in-stream flows, Sonoma Water also had to reduce its diversions from the lake and from the Russian River system. So to meet that temporary change order, Sonoma Water worked very closely with all of the contractors, including Santa Rosa. And we've been, as you know, undergoing quite a bit of work with our customers to help reduce demands on the system. And as a result, you can see that the cumulative reduction in diversions has been 30% compared to 2020. So that's very well in compliance with what was required for that temporary change order. If there were to be some significant storms, there's a possibility this could be the requirement for the 20% reduction in diversions could be lifted before the end of the month, but dry weather is predicted, so it's not expected that that will occur. And the term of this requirement goes from July through the end of October. The temporary change order expires December 13th, so Sonoma Water is already working hard on submitting another temporary urgency change order petition in the next few weeks. That's in anticipation in case it is a dry winter. They want to be able to have some relief from the mandated minimum in-stream flows beyond the the December 13th date. The long-range forecast, again, is still calling for dry conditions, but we're all very hopeful that we will see some storms. Next slide, please. So the summer has ended, and we are shifting into our fall messaging. So as we move into fall, the days are cooler, and the sunlight is up for fewer hours, and so plants are starting to prepare for winter, and they do not need as much water. So we're reaching out to our customers to let them know that it's time to prepare to turn off the irrigation systems. So start dialing them down, reducing their irrigation. It's also time to be rain ready, so we're encouraging them to make sure that they're ready to clean leaves and debris out of the way. We don't want those things flooding into the gutters and then into our storm drains and then into our creeks. We want them to turn off irrigation when it rains, and we encourage them to install a rainwater harvesting system. And there's some support that we are providing for that. Of course, we have a rebate, but we also have a workshop coming up. If we go to the next slide, please, I can talk about that workshop. So this workshop, Reusing the Rain, we are partnering with Daily Acts. They're a local nonprofit that has a tremendous amount of expertise in working with the public around water use efficiency, landscaping, rainwater systems, and this sort of thing. So we've partnered with them many times before with great success. So they'll be providing that workshop 2 times. The first will be in English on Tuesday, November 1st, and the second will be in Spanish a week later on November 8th. And those will be in the evening starting at 5:30. And folks can use the registration link that is shown there on the screen, srcity.org/workshops. They'll see all the workshops that we have either currently available or coming up soon, and they can register. It's free to attend. Folks who do register and attend will be entered into a contest or a drawing to see if they might win a free rainwater harvesting system. They have to be a Santa Rosa Water customer to get that, but that includes some barrels and other equipment that's needed for a starter kit for getting your first rainwater system in place. Next slide, please. The other workshop we wanted to mention has to do with the Our Water Future project that you're well aware of has just gotten started. So we are inviting our customers and our community to join us online and learn more about what we're doing to prepare for increasing our water supply resiliency and reliability over the long term. So we'll be having 4 online workshops for the public specifically. Those will be on Wednesday nights. The first is Wednesday, October 26th from 5 to 7. The next will be in January. So we'll be coming back to you to remind you about that and making sure the public is aware of that second one as well. So we're embarking on this study to identify opportunities to reduce our vulnerability to shortages. And we think that the public might be interested in learning more about what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. We invite their questions and their suggestions. The first half of the meeting will be very much focused on providing them with the information, and the second half will be open so that they have a chance to ask us questions and provide their input. There will be simultaneous Spanish translation. So as the speakers are presenting their slides and speaking, there will be simultaneous live interpretation with 2 interpreters there, very similar to what they do when they have city council meetings. And then if Spanish speakers have questions, those questions will be taken live, translated into English, and then back and forth as that conversation goes on with those interpreters supporting that effort. For more information and to find the registration link, folks can go to srcity.org/ourwaterfuture. And this QR code actually works as well. So if someone points their phone at that with their camera up, that'll take them to a link to go ahead and get to that Our Water Future page. The link for registering for this workshop is down just a little ways on the page in the upcoming meetings section. So we invite our community to attend that meeting. It will be taped, and we will place it on our website, a link to it, so that if they aren't able to attend but they do want to learn more, that same information is going to be available to them. And again, over the next year, we will have 4 of these workshops. This one will be talking about this initial effort that we have to set some goals and to identify potential water supplies to study and that sort of thing. So this is a really important workshop, and we really hope that our community will attend and learn more. We will also be doing some social media outreach. We have sent out water bill inserts, and we'll be having a City News Connection small article on October 20th, reminding our customers and our interested parties that this is coming up on October 26th. So again, we hope everyone can join us. Next slide, please. So that's what I have for your water supply update, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Close. Are there any questions by members of the board for Mr. Close? Seeing none, we will open it for public comment. We're now taking public comments on item 5.1. If you wish to make a comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. And first we'll start, if anybody in the chamber would like to make a comment, please come forward. Seeing nobody rise, Secretary Manis, do we have anybody online?
There are no hands being raised via Zoom.
Thank you. So next, Director Burke, could you introduce item 5.2?
Thank you, Vice Chair Arnone and members of the board. We're very excited to have item 5.2 in front of you today, as this is Water Professionals Appreciation Week, and Elise Miller, our communications coordinator, will be making the presentation.
All right. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Arnone and members of the board. I'd like to start with wishing you all a very happy Water Professionals Appreciation Week. As part of my presentation today, I would like to share a little bit about Water Professionals Week and how we are celebrating with Santa Rosa Water. At the end of this presentation, I would also like to request that a photo be taken with the board and some of our water ambassadors that are here with us today. That include Jason Leaf from Water Operations, John Kozlowski from the Wastewater Treatment Plant, Kimberly Zunino from Administration, Heather Aviles from the Water Use Efficiency Team, and Walter Narosky from the Laguna Environmental Laboratory. And then we also have Janine Saragosa from the Asset Management Team. So, next slide, please. All right, so as a little bit of background, Water Professionals Week was established in 2017 by the California legislature to celebrate the estimated 60,000 people that work in California's water industry. Now it's my honor to be here today representing the Santa Rosa Water team. This is a team of highly trained operators, engineers, technicians, biologists, and many other specialties that are working together to protect our community's water resources. These individuals are responsible for delivering a safe, reliable drinking water supply, wastewater collection, water recycling and beneficial reuse, and watershed protection. This is truly an impressive group of talented professionals, and the image you see on the screen now and the following graphics are being shared this week to highlight these amazing employees and tell their story. Next slide, please. We are using images like this to remind the community that Santa Rosa Water delivers more than just water. We deliver high quality drinking water that is tested over 200 times before it ever reaches the tap. That we serve 53,000 homes, businesses, hospitals, schools, and more with an estimated population of 175,000. Next slide, please. To deliver this water, staff work around the clock, monitoring, repairing, and maintaining over 1,200 miles of water and sewer pipe and other critical water infrastructure, like 6,000 fire hydrants, 19 water pump stations, 22 water tanks, 17 sewer pump stations, water operations, asset management, engineering staff, and many more are needed to ensure the safety and reliability of our community's water systems. Next slide, please. Operators, technicians, mechanics, scientists, and more work at the Laguna Wastewater Treatment Plant and the Regional Water Reuse System that recycles and beneficially reuses nearly 7 billion gallons of water and 33,000 tons of biosolids each year. Next slide, please. Our Stormwater and Creeks team is tasked with protecting over 100 miles of our creeks that run through our city, working to restore our waterways and to improve flood protection. Next slide, please. All of this is accomplished by the 276 employees representing over 80 job classifications. As you can see, Santa Rosa Water is a dynamic and talented team with a proven record of accomplishment. Next slide, please. In celebration of this team and all the work they do, this year for California Water Professionals Appreciation Week, Santa Rosa Water was honored and accepted a proclamation from the City Council on September 27th. And I'm happy to read that proclamation. Do that. So it says, whereas water is essential, and without safe and reliable water and wastewater treatment, no community and no sector of the economy can thrive or expand. And whereas now more than ever, we are proud of this important role the Santa Rosa Water team plays in making sure our community has safe and reliable drinking water, effective wastewater collection and reuse, stormwater protection, and clean and healthy creeks. And whereas, thanks to the technological advances by highly skilled and trained water experts and the dedication of Santa Rosa Water's professionals, our community's drinking water and treated wastewater meets the most stringent water quality standards in the nation. And whereas our community's drinking water is filtered, cleaned, tested, and distributed in a process carefully managed by trained water operators who also make certain our water distribution system is operated to ensure reliable water system pressures for residents, businesses, and firefighting. And whereas Santa Rosa is a leader in water recycling, reusing nearly 100% of the city's recycled water for urban and agricultural irrigation, as well as recharging the geyser steam fields to produce clean and renewable energy for 100,000 homes in the North Bay. And whereas our storm drain system and creeks are maintained to ensure a healthy, natural environment for all. And whereas these water professionals work 24/7 to plan for the future, maintain and upgrade systems, and improve the safety and resiliency of local water supplies for our community. And whereas Santa Rosa Water invests more than $135 million each year on water-related programs and projects that protect public health and the environment, improve local water supply reliability, replenish and clean up groundwater basins, provide water for fire protection, and protect against floods. And whereas the 276 essential water, wastewater, recycled water, and stormwater industry professionals at Santa Rosa Water have dedicated their careers to keeping drinking water, recycled water, treated wastewater, and our local creeks safe and reliable for our community, as well as neighboring communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved, this is what the mayor said, that I, Chris Rogers, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of October 1st through 9th, 2022 as Water Professionals Appreciation Week. All right.
Thank you for that, reading that into the record. I think it's
Yeah.
great words.
Can I go back one slide? Real fast. So in honor of this week, as well as going to receiving this proclamation from Council, Director Burke, along with our board chair and vice chair and Assistant City Manager Nutt and the city manager, all were busy this week recognizing staff, which I know I really appreciated and they appreciated as well. We had a lot of great feedback. So thank you to everyone who participated in those events. And then Santa Rosa Water is also sharing a series of posts on the city's outreach channels that highlight our employees, their hard work, their dedication. And you can find these on the city's Facebook page, as well as Instagram, srcity.org, and in this week's City Connections newsletter that will be distributed later today. Next slide, please. So, in closing, I'd like to say thank you to the Santa Rosa Water team and the Board of Public Utilities for your dedication and all that you do to protect our water resources, our infrastructure, and the environment. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions, comments.
Thank you for that excellent presentation, Ms. Miller. I was fortunate enough to join in some of those thank you sessions, one of them at 6:30 this morning, which was a little early, but it was a very packed house and a very lively crowd, which really reinforced in my mind that this is a 24/7, 365 operation, and there were a lot of people to thank, so it's a privilege to do so. Let me invite any board members who wish to ask a question or make any comments about the presentation to raise their hand, or yes, Director Wright.
Yeah, well, I would like to express my appreciation to can't remember the number exactly, the 280 plus employees in the water department. All important. All of those employees are professionals from the entire spectrum. So this is not just about the people in the office. This is about all operators, clerical, administrative people, whatever it might be. And in addition to also the finance and all that kind of razzmatazz. Well, one thing about water and wastewater, and it never stops. I mean, I guess in an earthquake we might have a problem, or in the fires we did, but in general, it's not like your internet or your telephone or your TV or any other utility in your power that just goes on and off. Generally speaking, our water runs all the time, and regardless of a power outage or a windstorm or whatever the problem is, it works. I think the only time at my house my water's ever gone off was when my service main broke, and they had to come and replace it. So, very dependable system we have here. So once again, my congratulations to all water professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Wright. And your career as a water professional makes your comments extra meaningful, so thank you. Any other comments by the board members? So if not, then we will take public comment on this item. We're now taking public comment on item 5.2. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. First of all, anybody in the council chambers wish to make a comment? If so, please step forward. And seeing no one step forward, let me ask Secretary Manis if we have anybody online.
We have no hands being raised via Zoom.
Okay, thank you. So after this, I think we're going to take a short break, and we're going to do a picture opportunity. And I was hoping we would have a large number of board members here, but it looks like we're going to be mainly water staff, so that's better. So hopefully they'll be on the camera and the screen up there. So if we could take a break now and just please somebody take control of this artistic endeavor. I'm sorry? If the board members could turn their cameras on, we will include them in the picture so they can be there. There you go, virtually, and we will get you into the picture. And everybody else, please come on down, and we will make this a memorable moment. All right, copies of that pictures will be available. No, never mind. Nobody will want to buy that. Let us move to the next item on the agenda. That would be item 5.3, a presentation by Robert Wilson. Will you please introduce that matter?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Arnone and members of the board. Item 5.3 is our laboratory update for 2022, and Robert Wilson, our laboratory supervisor, will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Arnone and members of the board. My name is Robert Wilson. I'm the laboratory supervisor out at the Laguna Treatment Plant. Next slide, please. So our the Laguna Environmental Lab, LEL, was established early on as a function of the Laguna Treatment Plant to provide chemical measurements of physical and chemical measurements of wastewater. Most environmental labs at wastewater treatment plants were established as in-house labs to provide data to operators about the operation of the facility. As you'll see, that really hasn't changed too much, but that's how many wastewater treatment plant labs started. We started an expansion in 2000, actually opening up in 2003 to add a broader scope of analytical testing, changes in permit requirements, and addition of other sources like doing drinking water analysis, changed how the Laguna Environmental Laboratory looked at analytical testing and the types of tests that we needed to do. So we had a major expansion in 2000, starting in 2000, ending in 2003. Currently, our staffing includes sample receiving and preparation, laboratory analysts, which includes our principal analysts. We do have a programmer that we're bringing on. We're actually in the recruitment process for that right now, but they serve as our information technology person, and then management for a total of 13 people. And last fiscal year, we processed 19,000 samples, just over 19,000 samples by the laboratory team. Next slide, please. So you can see here that majority of our client samples come from operations. That large blue section of the pie graph could actually be divided into there are permit required samples for operations and process samples that we analyze. Our next largest customer is our water section, followed by environmental compliance, biosolids, stormwater, quality assurance, which we're going to go into a lot in this presentation, and then engineering services, and then other like police and fire, that type of thing. So still, the majority of the samples that we do are really water and wastewater. It's what we're mainly certified for, and it's the largest chunk of our pie. Next slide, please. So we do provide a lot of customer service for our clients. We upload data for both the drinking water program and the wastewater program. This requires staff to make sure that our data is actually accurate with the quality control parameters that we analyze, and then verifying and double checking to make sure it goes through peer review before being submitted to the state. We also have a quality assurance coordinator that works in coordination with our group. They report to the Environmental Services Deputy Director, but they help us in providing sample training for legally defensible data. We also work with our clients to provide sample assistance and bottle kits, making sure that they have all the information that they need to collect the samples, and then the bottles that they're going to need with the right preservatives to get those samples into the lab so we have good data. It's one thing to think about is that you could have the best laboratory but poor sampling in the field, and you're going to have poor data because you can't do anything once you have a sample in that has been collected poorly. So a lot of effort goes into making sure that the samples that we get in the lab are collected properly and in the proper bottles so we can analyze them for the team. We do provide some consulting services for police and fire. We run samples, as I mentioned, for them, but there are often times like where they'll bring in samples for, or want to bring in samples for compressed gas cylinders. It's something that we don't do in-house, so we go the extra mile to make sure that we find a lab for police and fire, set up coordination with that lab, and sometimes even financing with that lab to make sure that they get the defensible data that they need for the cases that they're trying to make. And then we also provide support with contaminants of emerging concern. So PFAS has been a big one that we've worked on recently, making sure that it's a forever chemical that's in many items that surround all of us. And so making sure that those samples are collected without contamination was a big effort of our group in supporting our compliance with the order that came down from the state board. Next slide, please. So in order to maintain our accreditation, we work through the state board and ELAP, which is the Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program. They actually accredit all environmental labs in California. That's private labs that take samples from anybody, and public labs like the Laguna Treatment Plant lab. They adopted the NELAC Institute. TNI is how I'll reference it for the rest of the slides, but it's a standard for laboratories that, and all the laboratories in California need to adopt the changes by TNI by January 2024. So the deadline is coming for that one. This does require updates to our program, but it's really focused on the quality assurance program and not actually a lot at the bench. Next slide. So the question is, what is NELAC? TNI is an acronym within an acronym. NELAC is the National Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Conference. And so in order for us to comply with this, we actually need to make 855 changes to our quality assurance program. And like I said, this doesn't involve actually changing how analysts are performing the test at the bench, but it really changes the type of data that we collect about these. So you have to collect what the original temperature was on the thermometer before you do the corrected temperature. So there's little things like that that are all throughout the program that need changes. So it's a huge change in quality assurance. TNI is actually based on ISO, and it uses language consistent with ISO. If you were in an environmental lab anywhere else outside the United States, you would just comply with ISO. The United States has moved towards NELAC as our way of complying with ISO. And a way to think about this is if you go into a Starbucks in Santa Rosa or a Starbucks in Chicago, you're going to get similar coffee at those two locations. And that's really what this standardization does. It takes it that if you turn a sample into Laguna Environmental Lab and we analyze it for you, it should have the same quality control that that sample would receive if you sent it to a third-party laboratory. Next slide. So this is our timeline for compliance with TNI. There are tests that we have to do called proficiency testing. Those are a single blind test that we order from an outside source. That is, the analysts take those tests, analyze them, and they have to get the correct number with some error bars. We do very well on these, typically performing in the 98% on the first time and 100% on by the second run of running these tests. We also have to get external auditing done, so we need to get quotes. We're currently getting quotes from third-party auditors. The state requires that we have, since due to the complexity of our lab, they want us to have a third-party audit. We'll have to schedule that third-party audit. We have to do additional proficiency testing in 2023, and then we are planning to have the external third-party audit to the TNI standard in June of 2023. Why this is important is I mentioned that all labs have to be compliant with the state standard by January of 2024. Because the timeline of when we need to submit our application, we actually need to be in compliance by June of 2023 when that external third-party audit comes in. So through the third-party auditing process, there's a chance that it's often that there will be some things that we need to correct. We will then submit our corrective action plan to fix those things, and then submit our renewal application to the state for accreditation and receive, our application expires in February of 2024, and we'll receive our new accreditation certificate from ELAP in March of 2024. Just one click for me, please. Through this entire process, we will be updating our quality assurance manual, standard operating procedure, documentation, bench sheets to make sure we're complying with it, and doing laboratory training. It's really the quality assurance coordinator and my job to maintain this timeline. We have we're bringing on a new supervising analyst to help us with this process, and we're receiving support from a consulting firm, Kimball. They're actually doing an internal audit right now while I'm doing this presentation, and they are excellent helping us make sure that we're maintaining this timeline. Next slide, please. The other big thing that's happened in the last couple of years is I mentioned that we opened our lab in 2003. Many of the pieces of equipment were purchased at the same time when we opened that lab. So we have performed basic maintenance on it, and we have contracted with people to perform more advanced maintenance, and we've kept these instruments operating for well beyond their service life, which is a credit to the staff who takes care of this equipment. But much of them they're past their the support by the manufacturer, and they're using software that is on Windows 7 machines that are outdated, and it requires more work to transfer files from Windows 7 machines to more modern equipment. So we've been doing, making many purchases to replace the aging equipment that was purchased in 2003. Next slide, please. On the left there, you can see a picture of the new lab, what we call the new lab, the lab that was opened in 2003. And you can see all the crates as they line the hallway there. And then on the right, you can see a list of the instrumentation that we've actually replaced through this process. It isn't small, but the good news is it's almost done. We have one major instrument left to replace an ICP that we need to replace for higher level metals analysis for drinking water. But we've really pushed hard to do what we can to replace the older equipment and bring in the best equipment that we can find for the analysis that we're performing. Next slide, please. So for future projects, as I mentioned, we are working for different contaminants of emerging concern, including PFAS and microplastics. The ELAP has issued that they are going to be certifying microplastics as an analysis, so potentially looking at doing microplastics in-house. PFAS, the equipment needed is, instrumentation needed for that is beyond what we would do in the analysis that we would do, so we will likely continue to contract that out to third-party laboratories. but staying up to date with the sampling requirements, as it is such a challenging compound to make sure you don't have contamination with. As I've presented in the past, we are continuing our wastewater epidemiological studies. In addition to COVID-19 that we've been doing in our influent wastewater, we've started doing monkeypox as analysis on our influent wastewater for monkeypox. It is detected. The analysis that we get from COVID and monkeypox is an indication in our population, but doesn't say what percentage of your population has this. But it's helpful for our public health sector to have that data. And there is some discussion as new problems, new epidemiological issues like smallpox and polio come up, that the different labs can actually look at that data and find out the epidemiological information for that information. And then lastly, we are looking at microbial source tracking for pathogens. One question is, especially with our recycled water system, is if there is bacteria in our ponds, what is the source of this bacteria, being that they make excellent habitat for goose populations and avian populations, that there might be sources of pathogens in those wastewater that are not human in source. So microbial source tracking is another future project that we're working on as we're going through looking at things to come. Next slide. And with that, I just want to say thank you for giving me this time, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Wilson. It's a good day to recognize just the sheer diversity of things that are done by water professionals in Santa Rosa Water. So thank you for reminding us of how technical that can be also. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board? Yes, Board Member Wright. Still can't hear you.
Sorry, I got to unmute it so you can hear me. Thank you. Did you say, I think I heard you say that ELAP is a national standard, is that correct?
NELAP, yeah, the TNI is a national standard. ELAP is California's specific.
I see. So obviously, I mean, it's in the news constantly, other states having all these water issues, and obviously it's that's a complicated problem. But anyway, that's one question. And the second comment was, what's our regional cooperation like with Petaluma or with Windsor or something? They have their own labs, I think, but we must work with them. And how's that all pan out?
Yeah, we do work with them. We don't analyze samples for each other, but we do information exchange. So there's a Redwood Empire Laboratory Committee that we all attend, and we discuss how we're complying with the TNI standard and pitfalls that we're finding as we're going through this process together. We are fortunate enough to have the quality assurance coordinator within our team. So smaller labs struggle that the TNI standard requires that somebody else outside of the lab director, which is the role that I serve, it does your quality assurance, and so they have looked at doing some exchange programs between themselves. Like I said, we're lucky to actually have that position within the Santa Rosa Water team. So, but we do information exchanges with them. We help support each other, especially if it's a supply need, that type of thing. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, we'll now take public comments on item 5.3. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Is there anyone in the council chamber who would like to make a comment? Seeing nobody rise, Secretary Manis, do we have anybody online?
There are no hands being raised via Zoom.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to the consent items. We have 3 consent items on the agenda today, and do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Thank you, Board Member Wright. Is there a second?
Second.
I will second.
I think we have a three-way tie for a second, and I think I heard Chris Grable's voice first, so I will have Chris be the second on this one. Now that we have a motion, we'll open it for public comment. Taking comment on the consent agenda. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to make a comment? Seeing nobody, is there anyone online?
There are no hands being raised via Zoom, Chair.
Okay, so Secretary Menace, could you please do a roll call vote on the consent calendar?
Thank you. Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Walsh?
Aye.
Board Member Grable?
Aye.
Board Member Badenfort? Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
Let the record show that motion passes with five affirmative votes.
Very good. That takes us to item 7. There are no report items, so we'll move on to public comments on non-agenda matters. If anyone would like to make a comment on item 8, please make a comment via Zoom by raising your hand, and if you're dialing in via phone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Anybody in the council chamber wish to make a public comment? See nobody rise. Secretary Menace?
There are no hands being raised via Zoom.
Thank you. So that takes us to section 9. There are no referrals. I see no written communications. There is a subcommittee report somewhere because there was a subcommittee meeting of the City Council and BPU Liaison Committee that I was fortunate to attend. And we met on the 27th of September to review one item. That item was an update on the request from the Jackson Family Wines to use excess delivery capacity in the Geyser pipeline to transmit or wheel recycled water from the town of Windsor's reclamation facilities to their property, which is within Windsor's recycled water service area. Staff presented information on the amount of capacity in the pipeline, potential risks, associated mitigations, and provided an overview of potential agreement terms. The subcommittee reviewed the information, asked questions about additional recycled water supply availability from Windsor, direct staff to continue moving forward with negotiations based on the broad terms outlined in the presentation, and to return to the subcommittee with a more detailed set of terms for a potential agreement. So, unless anybody has any questions about that, are there any other subcommittee reports? I don't believe any other subcommittees met. So, any comments by board members on the subcommittee report? I'm seeing none. We will now open it for public comment on the subcommittee report. And if you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. *9 to raise your hand. Is there anybody wish to comment to the council? Nobody? Secretary Menace?
No public comments from Zoom.
All right. That brings us to item 12. Are there any board member reports that anyone would like to make on the board? Seeing none, we will move to the director's report. Director Burke.
Thank you, Vice Chair Arnone and members of the board. I have a couple items to let the board know about today. First, I wanted to let the board know that we had a very successful Creek Week that occurred in September, and we had 259 participants. We removed 2,082 pounds of trash from our creeks. We also had Stormwater and Creeks team led a public cleanup of the Prince Memorial Greenway and provided 5 different tours to citizens within Santa Rosa. We had a nature walk on Santa Rosa Creek. We had 2 tours of the downtown underground culverts that run under City Hall, and 2 tours of the Laguna treatment plant. We had significant interest in all of these events. As my staff said, it was off the charts this year. Our registration filled up fast, and each event had a waiting list. And then we also had 47 city staff throughout the entire city participate in our first annual Dash for Trash cleanup event. And we removed almost 900 pounds of trash from Santa Rosa Creek and the Laguna de Santa Rosa. So great job and a great Creek Week that was put on by our Stormwater and Creeks team this year. Also wanted to provide the board some updates on some legislation that we had been following and providing various updates to on the board over the past year. Now that September 30th has passed, which was the deadline for the governor to sign state legislation, there are a few bills that I just wanted to let the board know about. The first is AB 2142, which was authored by Assembly Member Gabriel. And this was signed by the governor, and it exempts turf rebates from California taxable income. Doesn't really affect Santa Rosa because we have always treated rebates as refunds and not income, but this is helpful throughout the state to know that that protection is there. Also, there was Senate Bill 222, which was authored by Senator Dodd, and this was vetoed by Governor Newsom. This was a bill that Santa Rosa, as well as other water entities, had taken an oppose unless amended position. So we were glad to see that it was vetoed by the governor. The bill would have established a statewide water rate assistance program to provide water affordability assistance to eligible residential water customers. And while we're definitely supportive of those programs, the problem with the bill was that there was no identified funding source and a lot of concerns that would go back to water agencies to provide the funding to the state. Senate Bill 1157, authored by Senator Hertzberg, was also a bill that a coalition of water agencies took an oppose unless amended position, including Santa Rosa. But this bill was signed into law, and this is going to further reduce the indoor residential water use standard. So in 2025, we'll be required to have a 47 gallon per person per day indoor residential standard, or required to meet that. And then in 2030, it will drop further to 42 gallons per capita per day. The biggest concern with this bill is just the feasibility and operational impacts, and so we'll be continuing to follow this as it progresses through and is worked on by the Department of Water Resources to put into effect. And Assembly Bill 2247, authored by Assembly Member Bloom, was vetoed by Governor Newsom. This was a bill that would have required manufacturers products containing PFAS and PFOA to disclose the presence in a publicly accessible database. And although this one was vetoed, the governor did sign into law AB 1817, authored by Assemblymember Ting, which will prohibit the manufacturing, distributing, selling, or offering to sell new textile articles containing PFOA or PFAS beginning in January of 2025, which is good news and something that we had supported in the city. And then last, I just wanted to let the board know about a new law related to the Brown Act, which may have some impact to the board starting next year. The governor signed AB 2449, and it's will take effect in January 1st of next year, and it does include new rules for remote participation and requires, at least at this point, a quorum of members of a legislative body to participate in person, and limits the ability of board members to teleconference. They must have just cause reasons. and also limits the, even with just cause reasons, the number of meetings that board members can teleconference. So the city clerk's office and city attorney's office is working on this, and we'll be developing the protocols for city council. And once we have that information, we will share that with the board later this year. But just wanted to make sure board members were aware, because this is going to likely reduce ability to teleconference into board meetings starting next year. And that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Director Burt. Are there any questions from the board members? Seeing none, we are now taking public comment on item 13. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in the phone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. First of all, is there anybody in the council chamber that wishes to make a statement? No. Secretary Menace?
There are no public comments from Zoom.
Right. Well, thank you all very much for the information and for your attendance. And again, thanks to all the water professionals during this Water Professional Appreciation Week. Your work is very much appreciated. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting in your honor.
Vice Chair Arnone,
Yes.
thank you. Just want to say thanks.
Oh, you bet.
See you next time.
See you next time. It'd be nice to see some people in person.